Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Stephanie and I appreciate you stopping by. I know it's been a little while since I posted my last video, but I'm back today with 6 brand new spring and Easter decor DIYs to share. Let's go ahead and jump right into project number 1. For this project, I started with one of these blank signs from the Dollar Tree and removed the hanger. I then used Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster to paint the inside of the sign with 2 good coats. Once that was dry, I used Waverly chalk paint in the color ink to paint the frame and back of the sign. Next, I grabbed 6 of the wooden beads from the hanger and used Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster to paint them. For the remaining 6 beads, I used Waverly chalk paint in the color ink to paint them. Once the beads were dry, I took some jute twine and placed a piece of Scotch tape on the end and twisted it together and trimmed it up to make it easier to string the beads. I then placed the beads on the jute, alternating the white and black beads to create a new hanger. When I had all of the beads on the jute, I fed one end through one of the holes at the top of the sign and tied it in a double knot to secure it in place and trimmed off the excess jute. I then repeated this step to attach the other side of the hanger. Next, I took this word happy that I traced off of the computer in a font that I found pleasing to my eye and taped it to a piece of carbon paper, then traced it on the top slat of the sign. I then used Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, watered down with just a bit of water to paint the word. Once I had that done, I took 6 of these wooden bunnies from this 12-pack that I picked up at the Dollar Tree and used these small black alphabet letters from Walmart to spell out the word Easter, placing one letter on each of the bunnies right above their little cottontails, trying to get them as close to even as possible. After I had all of the letters in place, I used hot glue to attach one of the bunnies with the letter E to the bottom left side of the sign, making sure I had it flush with the bottom part of the frame. I then used hot glue to attach the bunny with the letter R to the bottom right side of the frame, again making sure the bottoms of both pieces were flush. Now that I had the first and last bunnies in place, I used hot glue to attach the remaining bunnies to the bottom of the sign to spell out the word Easter, making sure to keep all of the bottoms flush with the bottom of the sign and to space them out as evenly as possible. Once I had all of the bunnies glued into place, this adorable little sign is finished. I think this one turned out really cute and it was quick and simple to put together. Moving right along to project number 2. For this project, I started with 5 of these short wooden arrow signs from the Dollar Tree and removed all of the hangers. I also used 5 of these peel and stick wall tiles from the Dollar Tree for this project. I peeled one of the tiles off of the backing and placed it down on the front of one of the arrows, making sure that I had as much of the pattern on the arrow as possible. Once I was happy with the placement of the tile, I pressed it down to adhere it to the arrow. Next, I flipped the arrow over and used a sharp utility knife to remove the excess pieces of the tile, cutting it off as close to the wood as possible. After I had the excess tile removed, I took a finger sander and went around all the edges to remove any excess that was left over and to give it a nice finished look. I then repeated these steps to cover the remaining 4 arrows. Next, I used one of these square wooden planks from this 6-pack from the Dollar Tree, as well as one of these longer wooden planks from this 6-pack, also from the Dollar Tree. I used the square plank as a centerpiece to attach 4 of the arrows together to form the shape of a cross, placing them all with the tips touching in the center. When I had them all placed the way that I wanted them, I used hot glue to secure them in place, again keeping all of the tips touching in the center and the arrows as straight as possible. Next, I used hot glue to attach the long plank to the back side of the bottom arrow, and then used more hot glue to attach the last arrow to the plank, with the flat side touching the bottom of the bottom arrow and the tip pointing downwards. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster to paint the cross with one thin coat. I then used apple barrel paint in the color Burnt Umber and gave the entire cross one good coat, including the back and sides. Once the paint was dry, I took some Waverly wax in white and heavily dry brushed the front of the cross to help the designs on the tile pop. Next, I used 2 strings of these square wooden bead garlands from the Dollar Tree. I took 16 of the beads and used hot glue to attach them together in a line, making sure to keep the holes on each of the ends. I also went ahead and used hot glue to fill in the holes on each end of the finished piece. I then took 16 more beads and created another piece, and then used hot glue to attach the 2 pieces together so that I now had one piece that was 2 beads wide. Next, I took 14 of the beads and created 2 pieces with 7 beads in each one, and then used hot glue to attach the 2 pieces together. I repeated this step with an additional 14 beads so that I now had 2 of the shorter pieces. So I used a total of 60 beads to create these 3 pieces. I used the same paint process on these pieces that I used on the cross so that they would all match. Once all of the paint and wax was completely dry, I used hot glue to attach the longest beaded piece diagonally across the center of the cross to cover up the gaps between the arrows. After I had the long piece in place, I used hot glue to attach the 2 smaller pieces to the cross to form the shape of an X, again covering up the gaps. To decorate this cross, I used 4 of these scrap pieces of baby's breath and used hot glue to attach them to the center of the cross with the stems meeting in the center. Next, I took 3 of these white flowers that I had in my scrap pile and used hot glue to attach them to the center of the cross. Then, to finish up this project, I took 2 sprigs of lavender and used hot glue to attach one to each side of the floral arrangement to give it a little pop of color. I did end up adding a jute hanger on the back so that I could hang this up, and this one is finished. I'm not sure how I feel about this one. I think it could be better. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let's move on to project number 3. For this project, I used some plaster of Paris and mixed it at a 2-to-1 ratio. I poured 2 cups of the plaster and 1 cup of water in a large plastic bottle, then replaced the lid and shook it up until it was completely mixed together with no lumps. Next, I took one of these latex balloons from the Dollar Tree and blew it up to the size that I wanted my eggshell to be, then used a small clamp to pinch the end so that it wouldn't deflate. I then stretched the mouth of the balloon over the mouth of the bottle and removed the clamp from the neck. With the balloon in place, I poured all of the plaster inside, then removed the balloon from the bottle, tying it shut. I did also place the clamp back down on the neck for a little extra security. I then gently twisted the balloon around until the entire inside was coated with the plaster, and then set it aside on a bowl for several hours to allow it to dry. Once the plaster was dry, I removed the clamp and used my scissors to cut the neck of the balloon and removed it from the egg. Now that I had the balloon removed, I used a small hole in the side of the egg as a starting point and went around the top, removing the extra pieces, making sure to leave the edges jagged so that it looked as if the egg had cracked open. When I was happy with the way it looked, I set it aside and grabbed one of these garden dishes from the Dollar Tree, along with a pack of reindeer moss also from the Dollar Tree, to create the base. I poured the moss into the dish and ripped apart any of the larger pieces, then arranged it around the edges of the dish, leaving an empty space in the center so that the egg could sit flat. I then set the egg in place and fluffed up the moss around the bottom and set it aside. For this next part of the project, I used 5 of these daffodils from this pick that I got at a local floral shop in town. Since most of these flowers were a bit squished, I took my heat tool and used it to reshape the blooms so that they looked a bit more realistic. It doesn't take a lot of time to do this, but it makes a huge difference in the finished project. Next, I used 5 of these 1.8-inch styrofoam balls from this package that I got at either the Dollar Tree or Hobby Lobby, I can't remember which. I took one of the daffodils and pushed the stem down through the center of one of the styrofoam balls and took a pair of wire cutters and cut off the bottom of the stem, leaving about a half an inch so that I could place it into some floral foam later in the project. I then repeated this step with the remaining 4 daffodils, making each one a little longer or shorter so that I had a variety of lengths. For this next step, I took 3 of these brown paper bags from this pack that I picked up at the Dollar Tree and cut the bottom off of one of the bags and then cut off the front and back sides since that's all I will be using. I then repeated this step with the other 2 bags so that I would have a total of 5 pieces. Next, I applied a generous layer of Mod Podge to the styrofoam ball, making sure to cover it completely. Once I had it coated, I pushed the stem of the daffodil down through the center of one of the pieces of brown paper, then wrapped it around the ball and scrunched it up around the top of the stem to resemble a flower bulb. When I was happy with the way it looked, I took some more Mod Podge and gave the entire bulb a thick coat to secure everything in place and set it aside to dry for a couple of hours. I repeated this step on the remaining 4 daffodils. After the bulbs were dry, I used some apple barrel paint in the color burnt umber and heavily dry brushed each of them to give them the look of being covered in dirt. Next, I used 1 pack of these 4.8-inch styrofoam rounds from the Dollar Tree. I did not even open the pack since I was using both rounds. I flipped it over so that the sticker was on the bottom and started placing the daffodils on top, pushing the exposed stems down into the styrofoam, starting with the tallest flower in the center, and then arrange the other 4 around it with 2 in the front and 2 in the back, making sure they were all sitting at a slightly different height. Once I had the daffodils arranged, I placed the arrangement down inside the egg and took some green Spanish moss from Walmart and carefully placed it around the foam rounds to cover the sides and then around each of the flower bulbs, making sure none of the foam was exposed, and this one is finished. I know this one had a lot of steps and took a little bit of time, but it was absolutely worth it. I love how this one turned out. On to project number 4. For this project, I used 2 of these white faux fur sheets from Hobby Lobby and an empty soda bottle. I started by placing some of these white rocks from Dollar Tree in the bottom of the bottle, filling it up just enough to give it some weight. Next, I placed the bottle in the center of one of the fur sheets, making sure the bottom of the bottle was flush with the bottom of the fur, and then used hot glue to attach the fur to the body of the bottle. Once I had that done, I set the bottle up and cut off the excess fur at the top, leaving it just long enough to fold over and cover the top. I then used hot glue to secure the fur to the top of the lid and then worked in sections, folding the remaining fur over, using hot glue as needed to secure it in place. This is now going to be the body of the bunny. I used this 1.8-inch styrofoam ball from this pack that, again, I'm not sure where I got them from, to create the tail. I placed the ball at the end of the fur strip that I cut off the top of the bottle and rolled it up until it was completely covered and cut it to size. I then used hot glue to secure the fur to the styrofoam. I rolled it up, first applying the glue to the outside of the ball, and then folded the ends in, securing them with more hot glue. After I had the tail covered, I took some scissors and trimmed up the fur so that it looked a little bit more like a bunny tail. When I was happy with the way it looked, I used a generous amount of hot glue to attach it to the back of the bunny, making sure to place it on the side that had the seams. For the ears, I traced out this set from the computer and then used a long piece of wire to trace out one of the ears, cutting off the excess wire at the bottom. I then repeated this step to trace the other ear with the second piece of wire. Once I was happy with the way the ears looked, I cut 2 pieces of the second fur sheet that were just large enough to fully cover the ears. I placed one of the ears on the back side of one of the fur pieces, making sure the longest of the fur was at the top of the ear, and applied hot glue over the top of the wire, and then folded the fur over on top, using more hot glue as needed to secure it in place. I then repeated this step to cover the second ear. After I had the ears made, I used hot glue to attach them to the top of the bunny's head, applying the glue to the bottom of the ear and placing it on the back side of the bunny's head, holding it in place until the glue set up. I also went ahead and added a little more hot glue to the front of the ear for a little added security. I then repeated this step to attach the other ear. Next, I used one of these small light pink heart buttons from this pack that I picked up at Hobby Lobby and used hot glue to attach it to the face of the bunny for her little nose. For the eyes, I used two of these 12mm black wiggle eyes from this pack that I also picked up at Hobby Lobby, and because they were a bit too long, I used some wire cutters to cut off most of the stem. I then used some hot glue to attach them to the bunny's face right above her little nose, trying to keep them as even as possible. Here is how she is looking so far. Next, I took some of this cream-colored lace ribbon from the Dollar Tree and wrapped it around the bunny's neck and cut it to size, then used hot glue to secure it in place, letting it overlap off to the side. I also made a little shoestring bow out of the same lace and used hot glue to secure it to the bottom of her ear. I then took one of these dogwood flowers that I had in my scrap stash and used hot glue to attach it to the lace ribbon on her neck where the two ends overlap. Next, I took two little sprigs of lavender from my stash and cut them a little shorter, and then used hot glue to attach one to each side of the dogwood flower. Then, to finish up this project, I trimmed up the tails on the neck ribbon, and this one is finished. I think she turned out absolutely adorable. What do y'all think? Moving on to project number 5. For this project, I started with one of these blocks of floral foam from this pack that I got on clearance at Hobby Lobby, and this large wreath ring from this pack that I picked up at Walmart. I placed the wreath ring in the center of the foam and, applying a little pressure, rocked it back and forth to make a slot in the foam for it to sit, and then used hot glue to secure it in place. I took a small piece of wire and bent it in the shape of a U since I did not have any of the floral pins, and I did end up making 4 of these in total. I then placed the wire pins down into the foam over the bottom of the ring to help secure it in place, focusing mainly in the middle. Next, I used 20 of these tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I separated them into 10 sets of 2 and then used hot glue to attach the 2 blocks together long ways. I continued to glue the blocks together until I had all 10 sets complete. Once I had all of the sets, I used hot glue to attach 6 of them together end to end in a straight line. I then used hot glue to attach 2 sets to each side of the 3rd set in the line to create a cross. Here is how the cross looked once all the pieces were in place. Next, I took 8 more tumbling tower blocks and, starting in the middle of the large cross, used hot glue to attach 1 long ways and 1 more block on either side of the middle block, using where the 2 bottom blocks meet as a guide to keep them centered. After I had the center blocks in place, I used hot glue to attach the remaining blocks to the long part of the cross, again using the center of the bottom blocks as a guide to keep them straight and centered. Here is how the cross turned out once I had all of the blocks in place. After removing any excess glue from around the blocks, I used Waverly Antique Wax to stain the cross. I wanted it to be pretty dark, so I did do 2 coats of wax, leaving the second coat on pretty heavy and allowing it to dry. Once the cross was dry, I placed it down in the center of the wreath ring and pressed it down into the foam so that I would know where to place the hot glue. I then applied a generous amount of glue to the foam and held the cross in place until the glue set up. I then went back and added some more glue around the base of the cross for a little added security and set it aside to dry. Next, I used this lamb's ear pick from Walmart and cut each stem apart into 4 smaller pieces and arranged them around the base. I then took these long lavender stems that I've had in my stash for quite a while and cut each stem into 3 smaller pieces and arranged them around the base. I felt that the arrangement was a little sparse, so I took 2 of these lavender bush picks from Walmart and again cut each stem into 4 smaller pieces and used them to fill in any sparse areas on the base. Then, to finish up this project, I took a small piece of this white muslin type fabric and heavily frayed the edges and draped it over the arms of the cross, and this one is finished. Y'all, this turned out absolutely stunning. It is hands down my favorite project out of this video and was so quick and easy to make. Let me know in the comments what you think about this one. Let's jump right into project number 6. For this project, I used one of these square wire wreath forms from the Dollar Tree and 1.5 rolls of this green burlap ribbon that also came from the Dollar Tree. I started by wrapping the entire wreath form with the green burlap, using hot glue as needed to secure it in place. Next, I took 2 of these fern picks from Walmart and cut them apart into individual stems and used hot glue to attach them around the wreath form. I then took 2 of these berry mix picks from Walmart and again cut them apart into individual stems and arranged them around the wreath using hot glue to secure them in place. I also used one of these small white velvet bunnies from Walmart and removed the ribbon and bow from its neck. I then took some of this 7/8 inch yellow ribbon from Walmart and cut a piece long enough to go around the bunny's neck. Since it was a bit too wide, I placed the line of hot glue along one edge and folded it over and pinched the 2 edges together to create a thinner ribbon. Next, I used hot glue to attach the new ribbon around the bunny's neck. I also made a simple shoestring bow using the same yellow ribbon and used hot glue to attach it to the bunny's neck where the other ribbon overlaps. I then took 2 long zip ties that I got in a multi-pack from Dollar Tree and used hot glue to attach them to the back side of the bunny so that it looks like this. Once I had the zip ties secured, I placed the bunny in the lower right corner of the wreath and then wrapped the zip ties around the wreath form and secured the bunny in place, then cut off the excess pieces of the zip ties. I did not want the bunny to move at all, so I added a generous amount of hot glue right behind its ears and held them in place until the glue solidified. Next, I took 3 of these larger plastic Easter eggs from this pack that I picked up at the Dollar Tree and used Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster to give them a couple good coats. I also used 8 of these standard size dyeable eggs from this set that I picked up at Walmart and again used Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster to give them a couple of coats. Once all the eggs were dry, I arranged them on the wreath form, nestling some of them down inside the greenery and used hot glue to secure them all in place. Next, I made 3 small shoestring bows using the same yellow ribbon I used for the bunny and used hot glue to attach one to each of the 3 larger eggs. I then took 3 of these buttons that are roughly the same size from this jar of buttons that I got at the Dollar Tree and used Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster to paint them. After they were dry, I used hot glue to attach one to the center of each of the yellow bows on the 3 large eggs, and this adorable wreath is finished. I love this wreath, y'all. It just screams spring to me with all of the different shades of green and little pops of yellow on the fern and the ribbons. And that's it for today's video. I really hope y'all enjoyed it and are inspired to create some beautiful decor pieces for spring. Again, I know it's been a while since I've posted, and I do truly apologize for that, but y'all know how hectic life can get sometimes. Hopefully I'll be back next Sunday with another spring and Easter video full of some rustic and primitive decor ideas. So if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and click that bell so you're notified next time I upload a video. Let me know which one of these projects is your favorite in the comments below, and please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, as it really does help me out here on YouTube. If there's anything you want to see coming up in the next few months, let me know that in the comments as well, and I'll see what I can come up with. Y'all have a fantastic day, and I'll see y'all next time.